Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now, moving on to Bilderberg, of course, our reporters are there, and the mainstream media is starting to talk about it a little bit. Here's a story from Yahoo. Never mind the G7 or Davos, it's Bilderberg time. Now, it looks like they might be understanding what's really going on here, but not really. Here's a quote from Yahoo. They say, critics deplore the fact that unlike last weekend's Group of Seven meeting in nearby Bavaria, no press are allowed at Bilderberg, giving rise to accusations of secrecy and suspicions of dishonest goings-on. But organizers say that since the gathering in Telfsbuken last year was in Denmark, they say, is away from prying eyes, it allows those attending to talk freely about hot-button issues of the day. Yeah, move along. There's nothing to see. Just the most powerful people on earth telling you that you can't talk to them, that you can't cover even who is there. Of course, they'll give us their official list, but we can't see who's going and coming there. Now, what kind of important issues would they be talking about? Well, of course, one of those is what's going on in the European Union itself. Greece is trying to come up with something for this Greek tragedy, and as the AP points out, Greece is getting a wake-up call next week, could seal its fate. Do you think they might be talking about that with some of the heads of the largest banks throughout the world, as well as the politicians there? They say the clear message that came out, swiftly tone down your demands in the bailout talks over the next week or face financial ruin. Yeah, these guys are playing hardball, these bankers who are there. And of course, one of the bankers who's there is Mario Monti. Remember him? Goldman Sachs. He was appointed to be the technocrat in charge of Italy when they were in financial straits. Evidently, the Greeks are not willing to take some Goldman Sachs banker and give him the reins to their government. So it looks like they're going to play pretty hardball with him. They say the IMF took the toughest stance, saying that it was bringing its negotiations back to Washington as there had been no sign of compromise. In other words, you haven't given us what we want, so we're going to take our ball back to Washington. That's some of the types of things that are going to be discussed there at Bilderberg. But of course, Charlie Skelton, who is there along with our reporters, and he's from The Guardian, he was on the air today with Alex Jones talking about what happened to him. He had a very interesting perspective because he was at the G7. And he said this in today's article at The Guardian. He says, at the G7, we journalists were pampered, but at Bilderberg, we're harassed by the police. He said Bilderberg uses the same security as G7, just on a slightly different mountain. So why don't the lavish state resources extend to allowing free press reporting? And then he gives a personal recount of what happened. He says, back at the G7 summit, barely a day and 20 miles from here, I was treated like a prince. I was one of the chosen 3,000 journalists who were primped, pampered, fed, burped, given free t-shirts, gallons of goulash, buckets of booze, and all the cheesy footage of world leaders we could swallow. We lay back on our branded beanbags and were tickled silly by the gentle fist of the G7 PR machine. But not anymore. The beanbag has burst. And then he quotes these these Austrian police who come out, step out of the vehicle, show me identification papers. A group of Austrian police officers took up position around my car. I pulled on the handbrake, opened the door, and I swear one young officer shifted his hand to the butt of his sidearm like I was about to rush them, all 12 of them, all of them armed. And of course, that's exactly what Josh Owens told us as well. When they got pulled over, the guys are putting their hand on their gun as if they're ready to pull it out and shoot them. We have an article up about an interview that they conducted with him there in Austria, as well as the interview that was today on the Alex Jones Show. Guardian journalist gets midnight raid by Bilderberg police. It didn't stop just with this checkpoint. And of course, what he's talking about in the article and what he talked about in the interviews with us was the fact that he got a midnight visit from the police. They came into his apartment, hung around for 15 minutes. He got tired of them hanging. Maybe he thought if he took off his clothes and took a shower, they would leave. They didn't. They waited. So I guess they were there for about a half hour or so. They're still there. They told him, get dressed when he gets out of the shower. Get dressed. We're going to take you out to your car again. And they inspected his car yet again. Nothing but harassment. So I ask you, what does this tell us about the two different groups? Does it tell us perhaps that at the G7, we've got a lot of essentially powerless figureheads who are doing precisely as they were told? People like John Boehner, bagmen, frontmen, vassals of the multinational corporations that are writing the laws and telling them what to do with these transatlantic, trans-Pacific partnerships with all of these trade agreements. They're the ones who are really, truly in power. The people who are writing these trade agreements are now meeting secretly in Bilderberg. We're not even allowed to know who is in attendance. And of course, they have their own rules. They call it the Chatham House rules. They don't play by our rules. They create their own separate rules, and they get our elected representatives like John Boehner, like Mitch McConnell, to ignore the Constitution, to ignore the legislative process, pretend it doesn't exist, invent a new one so that they can force these trade agreements upon us. That's what's really going on. And when you look at the fact that they want nothing to come out of this meeting, that they come down with an iron fist on everyone who is there, as we've had other reports about how they're jamming cell phone signals, perhaps eavesdropping on cell phones there, this massive security cordon there, that tells you that you are truly at the center of power there and not at that fake PR event that they call the G7.
From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape, but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new Infowars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfowarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.